Have you ever had one of those mornings where everything, and I mean everything, goes completely wrong? Yeah, that was me. On the day of probably the most important job interview of my life. And honestly, if you had told me that morning that this disaster would somehow change everything for me, I would have laughed. Or maybe cried. Probably both. It started like any other desperate, unemployed morning. I was running on 3 hours of sleep, too much cheap coffee, and an overwhelming sense of panic. At that point, I had been job hunting for 6 months. 6 long months. Dozens of resumes sent. A handful of interviews. Even fewer callbacks. Each rejection felt heavier, dragging my confidence closer and closer to the ground. I was tired. I was broke. I was starting to wonder if I had made a huge mistake with my entire life. Then, like some sort of miracle, I got an email. We'd like to invite you for an interview for the marketing coordinator position. Monday, 9 a.m. My heart actually skipped a beat when I read it. This company wasn't just any company. They were the company, the one everyone wanted to work for. Cool culture. Real career growth. Good benefits. It felt like maybe the universe hadn't completely forgotten about me after all. I spent the entire weekend preparing. Rehearsed my answers. Picked out the perfect outfit, crisp white shirt, navy blazer, not too formal, not too casual. I even mapped out the route to the office 3 times just to be sure. I was ready. Or at least, I thought I was. Monday morning rolled around, and of course, because life has a twisted sense of humor, it was pouring rain. Like, movie scene pouring. Buckets and buckets of water coming down from a dark, miserable sky. I left early, umbrella in hand, determined to stay positive. It's fine, I told myself. It's just a little rain. 5 minutes later, my umbrella flipped inside out. 10 minutes after that, I stepped into a puddle so deep it soaked my socks. By the time I made it to the subway, I was already shivering, my perfect outfit sticking to me in awkward patches. Still, I was clinging to hope. Maybe I could dry off in the lobby. Maybe no one would notice. But then, the train stalled. 20 full minutes, sitting underground, watching the clock tick closer and closer to 9 a.m. I remember gripping the pole so hard my knuckles turned white, silently begging the universe to just, for once, cut me a break. By the time the train finally lurched forward and I sprinted the 6 blocks to the office, I was late. 15 minutes late. Soaked. Shaking. And to top it all off, as I tried to grab my folder out of my bag, my coffee spilled all over my shirt. Right there, in the middle of the lobby. A huge, ugly brown stain blooming across my chest like some sort of badge of failure. I just froze. Right there by the elevators, dripping wet, coffee-stained, watching a small puddle form around my shoes. People were staring. Receptionists whispering. Someone in a sharp suit glanced at me with that look, the one that's half pity, half second-hand embarrassment. And in that moment, I wanted to run. Just turn around, leave, crawl back into bed, and forget this entire day ever happened. Because seriously, who in their right mind would hire this mess? But then, I don't know. Something inside me, stubbornness, desperation, pure exhaustion, made me stay. I took a deep breath, wiped my hands on my soaked pants, and said to myself, well, you're already a disaster. You might as well show them the real you. So I marched up to the receptionist, dripping all over her pristine desk, and said, voice shaking, "Hi. I'm here for the 9 a.m. interview." She blinked, tried not to laugh, and pointed me toward the elevator. And as I rode up, alone in that tiny metal box, heart pounding against my ribs, shoes squishing with every step, I told myself, you have nothing left to lose. Just be honest. Just be yourself. It's the only shot you've got. I didn't know it yet. But that messy, humiliating morning? It was about to turn into the most important turning point of my entire career. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and I stepped out into a sea of glass walls and pristine white carpets. Everything smelled like money, fresh furniture, polished wood, expensive cologne. And then there was me. Dripping. Stained. A walking, squelching embarrassment. A woman in a sharp navy suit was waiting at the reception desk. She looked down at her tablet, then up at me, her perfectly arched eyebrow twitching just slightly. "You must be Alex," she said, hesitating just a beat too long. I nodded, trying to force a smile, wishing the ground would just open up and swallow me whole. "Right this way," she said, her voice clipped, professional. She led me down a hallway lined with frosted glass offices, past important-looking people who didn't even try to hide their stares. I caught glimpses of myself in the glass, my hair plastered to my forehead, my shirt a patchy mess, my shoes leaving wet footprints behind me. When we reached the conference room, she opened the door and gestured for me to go inside. Sitting at the long table were 3 people. A middle-aged man with silver hair and kind eyes. A woman in her 30s who looked like she could run a marathon before breakfast and still have energy left over. And another guy about my age, tapping something on his phone under the table. They all looked up when I walked in. And for a heartbeat, there was silence. The silver-haired man, clearly the boss, cleared his throat. "You had a rough morning, I take it?" he said, smiling gently. Something about his tone, not mocking, just human, made me exhale for the first time in what felt like hours. I could have lied. Could have laughed it off. Could have pretended I wasn't standing there soaked, miserable, and about 3 seconds from crying. But instead, I just told the truth. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaking a little. "Pretty much everything that could go wrong did." There was a beat of silence. And then, the silver-haired man chuckled. A low, genuine laugh that filled the room with something warm. "Well," he said, setting his pen down, "let's hear about it." I blinked. Sorry?" He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands behind his head. "Tell us the story," he said. "Start with the umbrella." I stood there, completely thrown off. Was this a test? Was this some weird psychological trick to see if I could handle pressure? But honestly, I had nothing left to lose. So I took a deep breath, sat down, and started talking. About the flipped umbrella. About the subway delay. About the puddle-soaked socks and the tragic coffee stain. I told it all, voice shaky at first, then gaining momentum as the 3 interviewers started to laugh. Not cruelly, but in that shared, "Yeah, life is ridiculous sometimes," kind of way. And somewhere in the middle of my rambling, self-deprecating story, something shifted. The room relaxed. I relaxed. It stopped feeling like an interrogation and started feeling like a conversation. We talked about resilience, about handling bad days, about staying professional even when everything falls apart. They asked me about my previous work, sure, my resume, my skills, but it wasn't stiff or formal anymore. It felt real. It felt human. At one point, the silver-haired man, his name was Mike, I later learned, shared his own disaster story. How early in his career, he showed up to an important client meeting with mismatched shoes after pulling an all-nighter. Everyone laughed, including me. And for the first time that morning, I felt something close to hope flicker in my chest. Maybe this wasn't a total disaster after all. When the interview wrapped up, Mike stood and shook my hand, firmly, warmly. "Thanks for being real with us today," he said. "Sometimes how you handle chaos says more about you than any resume ever could." I walked out of that building soaked, cold, and still smelling faintly of coffee. But inside, something had shifted. I didn't know if I would get the job. I didn't know if they'd overlook my mess of a first impression. But for the first time in months, I felt proud of myself. Not for pretending to be perfect. Not for having the right answers. But for showing up. For staying. For being human. And sometimes, that's enough. The next few days were torture. I kept replaying the interview over and over in my head. Every stutter. Every awkward laugh. Every moment I wished I had sounded smarter, more polished, more put together. Even though the conversation had felt good, real, even, that voice in the back of my head wouldn't shut up. They probably just laughed at you out of pity. No one wants to hire someone who shows up looking like they fought a hurricane and lost. You blew it. I tried to stay busy. Applied for more jobs. Updated my resume, again. Pretended not to jump every time my phone buzzed. even though my heart would race every single time. Nothing. Radio silence. For 3 long, brutal days. By the 4th day, I had convinced myself it was over. Another almost. Another chance that slipped through my fingers. I was curled up on the couch, wearing sweatpants that probably needed to be washed 3 days ago, binge-watching bad TV, when my phone rang. An unknown number. My stomach dropped. I almost didn't answer. Almost let it go to voicemail. But something, hope, stupidity, desperation, made me swipe to pick up. Hello. Hi, is this Alex? A woman's voice said. It was professional, but there was a smile behind it. Yes, this is Alex. I sat up straighter, suddenly hyper-aware of how terrible I looked, as if she could somehow see me through the phone. This is Kelly from Brightwave Marketing. We just wanted to follow up on your interview earlier this week. My mouth went dry. My heart pounded so loudly, I almost didn't hear what she said next. We'd love to offer you the position, if you're still interested. For a second, I actually thought I had misheard her. I sat there, blinking at the wall, trying to make the words make sense. You. I stammered. You want to hire me? She laughed, a warm, easy laugh. Yes. Mike and the team were really impressed. They loved your honesty, your resilience, and your attitude under pressure. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Yes, I said. Yes, I'd love to accept. Kelly went over the formalities, start date, salary, better than I expected, benefits. I barely registered any of it. I was too busy trying not to cry into my cat's fur. When I hung up, I just sat there for a moment, phone still in my hand, staring at the ceiling. I did it. I actually did it. Not by being perfect. Not by pretending to have all the answers. But by showing up, messy, flawed, real. The first day at my new job was nothing like I imagined, in the best way. Sure, I was nervous. Sure, I double-checked my outfit 5 times, terrified of another coffee disaster. But when I walked into that bright, bustling office, there was Mike at the front desk, giving me a big grin and a thumbs up. Glad you made it back, he said. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Like I belonged. The first few weeks were a blur of onboarding, training, and awkward small talk with new coworkers. But it was different this time. No fake smiles. No gut punch meetings. No walking on eggshells, terrified of making a mistake. When I stumbled, people helped me up instead of tearing me down. When I had questions, people answered without rolling their eyes. When I succeeded, even in small ways, people noticed. It wasn't a dream job. It wasn't a perfect company. But it was real. It was human. And it gave me something I hadn't realized I was missing all those months before. Hope. Hope that there were good people out there. Hope that even when everything feels like it's falling apart, something better might be waiting just around the corner. Hope that sometimes, maybe even most times, the messy, imperfect, honest version of you is enough. And that all started because I showed up to an interview looking like a soggy disaster with a coffee stain the size of Texas on my chest. Life's funny that way. It's funny, looking back now, how one single messy morning could shift the way I see everything. Before that day, I thought success was about being perfect. About showing the world the best version of yourself, polished, composed, prepared. I thought interviews were like performances. Say the right things. Wear the right outfit. Smile the right way. Hide the messy parts, the scared parts, the tired parts. I spent so much time trying to be what I thought companies wanted. Trying to fit into boxes. Trying to be professional enough. Experienced enough. Confident enough. But the truth is, real life doesn't fit into neat little boxes. Neither do real people. That morning, when everything went wrong, when my umbrella flipped inside out, when the subway betrayed me, when coffee decorated my shirt like some abstract painting, I didn't have the energy to pretend anymore. I couldn't fake polished. I couldn't fake perfect. All I could be was me. Flustered. Late. Stained. But still standing. Still trying. And somehow, miraculously, that was enough. Starting that job at Brightwave wasn't just a career move. It was a life move. It taught me things no textbook, no career counselor, no well-meaning mentor ever could. That resilience matters more than perfection. That honesty builds real connections faster than any rehearsed speech. That showing up, even messy, scared, and unsure, is braver than staying home hiding your flaws. It changed how I showed up in every room after that. No more pretending to have it all together. No more rehearsing fake answers for the sake of sounding impressive. No more shrinking parts of myself to fit someone else's idea of professionalism. Instead, I learned to bring all of me. The messy parts, the nervous parts, the determined parts, the hopeful parts. Because when you show up real, you give people permission to meet you where you are, not where they expect you to be. And honestly, those are the kinds of people you want to work with anyway. The ones who see your messy, stubborn, trying like hell self and say, yeah, we want that person on our team. Of course, not every day at Brightwave was perfect. There were tough days, hard conversations, failed projects. Life didn't magically become easy just because I found the right job. But even on the hardest days, I carried that lesson with me. That I didn't have to be perfect to be worthy. That I didn't have to be flawless to add value. That my worth wasn't tied to how neatly I could package myself for the world to consume. And when the next big interview came, a year and a half later, for an even bigger opportunity, I didn't wear a stiff, uncomfortable outfit just because it looked professional. I didn't memorize canned answers. I didn't pretend to be anything other than who I was. I walked in, a little nervous, a little excited, fully myself, and told the story of that rainy, coffee-soaked morning. And guess what? They hired me too. Not in spite of my imperfections, but because of them. Life is messy. People are messy. Careers are messy. But that's what makes them beautiful. That's what makes them real. And if there's one thing that soggy, miserable, coffee-stained version of me taught me that day, it's this. The real you is enough. Always has been. Always will be. So if you're out there, stuck in that messy middle, feeling like you're not polished enough, not prepared enough, not enough, please hear me when I say, you don't have to be perfect to be worthy. You don't have to have all the right answers to deserve a seat at the table. You don't have to hide the parts of you that are scared, messy, human. Because sometimes, the very thing you think is ruining your shot, the rain-soaked shirt, the nervous laugh, the stumble on your words, that's the thing that makes you real, relatable, memorable. People don't connect with perfect. They connect with authentic. And honestly, we need more of that. More people showing up real, even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. Maybe you're sitting there right now, second-guessing yourself. Maybe you're replaying a mistake you made last week. Maybe you're beating yourself up over a job interview you think you blew. If that's you, I see you. And I promise, one messy day doesn't define you. One rejection doesn't define you. One spilled coffee moment doesn't define you. You're bigger than your worst day. Stronger than your biggest mistake. More capable than you realize. And sometimes, the universe uses the absolute messiest moments to reroute you exactly where you're meant to be. Trust that. Trust yourself. Keep showing up, coffee stains and all. Hot beverage sparkles. Call to action. Backhand index pointing right. Have you ever had a job interview, or any life moment, that felt like a total disaster, but somehow ended up changing your life for the better? Backhand index pointing right. I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. Speech balloon. And if you found a little piece of yourself in my story today, if you've ever felt not enough, or too messy, or just plain overwhelmed, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Bell. We're all just trying to figure this out together. One messy, beautiful, imperfect step at a time. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I'll see you in the next one. Waving hand.